Rise and shine, it's espresso time. Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I am not a morning person. But when you start your day with a powerful routine that inspires you, like watching one of these videos, it can change your life. So let's start your day off right together. Grab your coffee, know that I believe in you, and get ready for a shot of espresso with Jeff Bezos.
I wake up every morning.
Espresso keep me going.
I wake up every morning.
What do you say to employees when you obviously have some traders in the stock who are not happy and suddenly the stock is down 25% after a quarter?
Well, since 1997, at almost every all-hands meeting, we have 2 all-hands meetings a year. At almost every all-hands meeting, I remind employees that, if the stock is up 10% this month, don't feel 10% smarter, because when the stock is down 10% some month, you're going to have to feel 10% dumber, and it's not going to feel as good. And so it's, ownership is, we give most of our compensation is done in terms of stock compensation, and part and parcel with ownership is a mentality of long-term thinking. Owners think longer term than renters do. So I have a friend who rented his house to some tenants, and instead of getting a Christmas tree stand at Christmas, they just nailed the Christmas tree into the hardwood floors of the house. No owner would ever do that. And but sometimes that's a bad tenant. They're good tenants, but that's a bad tenant, and it's because this is the same old thing about nobody ever washed a rental car, and you take better care of the things that you own, but one of the responsibilities of ownership, and definitely deep inside the Amazon culture, is to think about the fundamentals of the business and not the daily fluctuations in the stock price. There's no information in it.
Think short-term with yourself and long-term with the results. Short-term with yourself, with your drive, with the energy that you show up with every day, and long-term with the results. I think people have it flipped. I think we're too patient with ourselves. And it's like, oh, it's okay, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it the next day. I put in, today's been hard, today's been rough, I'll do it tomorrow. But we're really impatient with the results. It's like, well, where are the results? Why are the results not happening? You need to flip it. Be less patient with yourself. Be more demanding of yourself. Think short-term yourself. Like, today matters. That's a short-term thinking. Today matters. Today, when I'm filming these videos, Timo, today matters, right? Today matters. Can you give me a high five? High five, Timo. High five. You see you're gonna do it in the car? High five, Timo. All right, he's not doing it. Today matters. Today matters, guys. Today matters. For me, making this video, right? Not even today. Today, this moment right now matters for me. I'm making this video for you. That means something to me. I need to show up. I need to be my best. I need to bring my drive, my energy, as much passion as I can. Whether I succeed in being able to move people with this video or not is to be determined, but I need to show up as my best. Today matters. This moment right now matters. I need to be less patient with myself. But be patient with the results. Be more patient with the results. Think more long-term with the results. That this video might not blow up. Even if I put my best into this video, that this may not be the one that blows up, but maybe tomorrow's is, or maybe the next day's one is, and maybe if I keep going every day, keep making videos every day for years and years and years, I'm gonna get mine. It's gonna come back. Karma is practical. Things will happen. The good will be put out there. I will be rewarded. I think people obviously get frustrated. I think people are on both sides of the fence of patience. Some people love patience, some people hate patience. The answer is always both. Like in most of these either or questions, debates, guys, it's usually both. It's just context. There was this great interview that Tom Bilyeu and Gary Vee did together. And Tom goes on Gary's show and says, I hate that you preach patience because I'm impatient. And I hate that you're sharing patience, because my message is the opposite. Impatience. They're actually saying the same thing. Like if you actually listen to them, they're saying the same thing. Tom is just thinking short term, that today matters. Be impatient with yourself. Go and do the work that you're trying to do. Stop letting yourself off the hook. Show up today. And Gary is saying, be patient with the results. Think long-term with the results. And so it has to be both. It's not how you do it. How do you be patient with the results? How do you be patient with the results and impatient with yourself? A couple things. One, remind yourself that today matters. Today matters because you're here. Whether you're making videos, talking to clients, working at a job, whatever you're doing, like make it count. There's no dead time. Every time is intentional. Time matters. Time is intentional. Even if you're working for somebody else, even if you're doing something you don't like, you're doing it, so it's gonna be good. This is how you start to build your standards and self-identity, because the more you're doing work that you hate and then you deliver crappy results, that starts to take its toll on your self-worth. Even if you hate the job you're doing, you crush it. My first job, I was doing data entry. I was doing landscaping, laying out grass, sod for people's homes. I hated the work, but I put everything I had into it. I was the best performer on my team always because I was there. Not for them to see me, but for me to see me, for you to see you. The way you show up anywhere matters. So what are you gonna do for yourself? To remind yourself that today matters. Like right now, this moment matters. What are you gonna do after this video? You're gonna watch this video and then what? What happens next? That matters. You're gonna just go and lounge and relax and take the rest of the day off, or feel like you can't do things. You're gonna go take some kind of action. That matters. Today matters. Remind yourself as much as possible. Today matters. Today matters. Make it part of your morning routine. Today matters. This matters. 2, surround yourself with the people who are doing the thing that you want to do. The people who are thinking the way you want to think. One of the things that really helped me in having the patience with my business was seeing how long it took other entrepreneurs. Almost no story of entrepreneurship is I had an idea and the next day it was a success. That's what we kind of think it is, right? And I know you guys watching this, you're a little later on, you've already started your business a little bit, so you know that it's hard. But we don't know other entrepreneurs. I mean, most of us don't have this giant circle of people around us who are doing what we want to do, who will tell us it's okay. Like this is part of the process. So being around Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Oprah Winfrey and these people, at least for me, it was really helpful to say, okay, like they're working incredibly hard and it takes time. They're working incredibly long hours, putting in incredible amounts of effort, and it's still taking them time before it pays off. And so the more that you see it, the more you normalize it. The more you see it, the more you feel like you're not a defect, right? It's like you're not screwed up. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not incapable. This is just a process. You don't just get up on skis and do jumps down the hill. You don't just get up on a bike and you're off and flying. There's a process. You don't just, when you learn to walk, you didn't just get up and run, right? There's a process. Same thing with a business. But if you don't see it, you feel like a loser. I felt like a loser. In my first business, I felt like a loser. I felt like nothing was working. I felt like I sucked. I felt like, I don't feel like, why? I'm not a dummy, right? I'm not stupid. Why am I such a loser? Why can't I not get this business to work? I'm putting in effort. I'm hustling every single day trying to build this thing up. Why is it not working? When I started to surround myself with, at that time, just books, showing people's journey, it made me feel like I was normal. At least I was part of a special group and that this was the process. So the more that you're around that, whether it's aspirational leaders like the people I profile on my channel, whether it's a natural community of people like we've got in Movement Makers, where you can be around people who are doing it and you don't feel so alone, I think it really matters. And tip number 3 is just stay connected to your why. Stay connected to why you're doing this. Stay connected to the mission. There's so many things that we give up on because we don't get results. But now looking back, like, I wish I just kept doing it. I wish I kept just doing it. I wish I just didn't quit on that thing. I wish, why did I stop doing that thing? That idea that I had a couple years ago, why? Why am I not doing it anymore? I should have. I'd be way further ahead if I just kept going. You lost track of the why. You lost track of why you're doing it. You lost track of the mission or the purpose. And sometimes the mission purpose can seem too big, but reminding yourself that you can have an impact, that the work that you do matters, that if it only touches one person's life today, that's a worthy goal. to chase down. If you can connect to why you're doing it, it gives you more perspective and more patience. Those 3 things. Do that, it'll change your life. When you can learn to be more impatient with yourself and more short-term with yourself, that today has to matter. Today has to mean something. Today, this moment has to count. And then more patient and more long-term with the results of where you're going. That's when life starts to get really good. Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of following through on your goals. 35%, that's not enough. That's not enough just to get motivated. Believe Nation, we're here, you're here. Today matters, you're an action taker. When you commit to a plan of action, of when and how you're gonna follow through. When you write it down, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you commit publicly to somebody else, it jumps to 95% chance. From 30-something% to 95% chance of you following through. Believe Nation, we need to make this happen. So question of the day, your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action specific for the next week. Put it down in the comments below and I'm gonna show on screen sometime next week to celebrate you. Also, if you want to have more self-love, self-confidence, self-belief, I've designed a special free training to help you get it. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to develop a new habit. And I want that for you. I want you to develop the habit of self-belief, self-confidence, self-love. So for the next 254 days, I'm going to send you a link by email to an unlisted video to get on for free. It's in the description below. Go check it out.
If everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do.
Stress primarily comes from not taking action. If you absolutely can't tolerate critics, then don't do anything new or interesting. A young person starting their career, I think there are probably a lot of things. Some of them are very well known and people have heard them many times, they're still true. One of those that you should always focus on, a young person should find something that they're passionate about to do. And that's not going to surprise anyone. It's a clear thing to do. It's very hard. If you don't love your work, you're never going to be great at it. I think the other thing I would suggest to any young person, even before they start their career, is to really think about their choices. Because I find young people, and when I was young, I made this mistake too. You can get very fixed on your gifts. So everybody has gifts. You know, you have gifts and you have things that you didn't get gifted. Maybe you're extremely beautiful. Maybe you're extremely good at mathematics. There are a lot of things that you can be given. But those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices that construct your life, not your gifts. You can celebrate your gifts. Be proud of them. Be happy of them. Actually, don't be proud of them. Be celebratory of them, but you can't be proud because they're gifts. They were given to you. You didn't earn them. You can only be proud of the things you earn. And so as I got older, I started to realize I wasn't proud of my gifts. I was always good at school. School was always easy for me, and I was always proud that I was a great student. I got A's in all my classes. I was good at math, all of that. And I thought that's who I was, but it's not true. Those are the things that are gifts. What was hard for me is deciding to work hard, deciding to use my gifts in certain ways, to challenge myself, to do things that I didn't think I could do, to put myself in uncomfortable situations. We all I would say to a young person, you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. Which one of those, when you're 90 years old, are you going to be more proud of? Look, we would all love all of our numbers to be smooth lines up and to the right, and that would be terrific. But that's not how it works. Those numbers are output measures, and I guess you could try to manage your quarterly earnings very precisely, but I think personally that would be a mistake. Most of the work that we put into any particular quarter happened years ago. So it's not, there aren't that many knobs you can turn during a quarter. I mean, you can, but they're like eating your seed corn if you turn those knobs. You don't want to do that. And so people, I think if you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results. So the Benjamin Graham quote here is that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. And I think people are well advised to build a company that wants to be weighed and not voted upon. And that means having good return on invested capital and having lots of free cash flow. But if you said to me, if I said, here's a job I would reject. If somebody came up to me and said, Jeff, I want your job to be to drive up the Amazon stock price and just manage that directly. Now this might sound ridiculous to some of you, but many companies actually do this. They actually go out and they try to sell the stock. That's kind of the final output. And it's much better to say, okay, let's not do that. That's not going to be sustainable. It's kind of a silly approach. What are the inputs to a higher stock price? And you say, okay, well, free cash flow and return on invested capital are inputs to a higher stock price. Okay, so let's keep working backwards. What are the inputs to free cash flow? And you keep working backwards until you get to something that's controllable. And a controllable input for free cash flow would be something like lower cost structure. And then you back up from there and you say, okay, well, if we can improve our picking efficiency in our fulfillment centers and reduce defects are very, very costly. It's probably, reducing defects at the root is one of the best ways to lower cost structure. And so then that starts to be a job you would accept. You would say, if you're a reasonable person, you would say, I have no idea how to drive up the stock price. I can't manage that directly. It's not a controllable input. But I can make your picking algorithms more efficient. And that will reduce cost structure and then, follow that chain all along the way. That's what you do in all of these businesses.
Failure and invention are inseparable twins. Everybody wants to be inventive. If you go talk to corporate America or any institution, actually, government agencies and so on, innovation is something to be proud of. People like invention. But the problem is they don't like failure. And you cannot have invention without failure. If you already know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. And only through experimentation can you get real invention. The most important inventions come from trial and error with lots of failure. And the failure is critical, and it's also embarrassing. And so that's why people, when we're kids, we always are doing trial and error, and we're never embarrassed. You watch a little toddler, and they will try for hours to put a square peg in a round hole, and it never works. But it doesn't keep them from trying. And they try things like that, and that's how they learn. And we all have that when we're little, and then as we get older, somehow it's not as cool as you get older to fail and to fall down. It looks clumsy, and so we get in our grooves, we have a set of expertise and skills, it's kind of a comfort zone, and you have to constantly push yourself to say, no, I don't care about failure. In fact, I say at Amazon, we have to grow the size of our failures as the size of our company grows. We have to make bigger and bigger failures, because otherwise none of our failures will be needle movers. And so I would see it as a very bad sign over the long run if Amazon wasn't making larger and larger failures. And if you do that all along the way, that is going to protect you from ever having to make that big, kind of Hail Mary bet that you sometimes see companies make right before they fail and go out of existence.
The most influential people in my life were my grandparents. And my mother had me when she was 17 years old. She raised me with my grandparents' help. And she was still in high school when she had me. That was not cool in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1964. But she did an incredible job. But I was lucky because I had not just her, but she married my father when I was about 4 years old. He has been a huge influence in my life. But my grandmother and grandfather were like second set of parents for me. And you learn different things from them because they're at a different stage of life and they know different things, they're calm about certain things. It was a huge gift to me. My grandfather had a ranch in Texas, and I spent all my summers there from like age 4 to 16, and he was the most self-reliant person. He did all of his own veterinary work, all the things, I mean, and to observe him solve problems and figure out how to do things with no tools and no resources and, very small amounts of money, it was a huge education from an early age. So we were very lucky. One of the things that I know people who they don't have great family situations, and sometimes they break that cycle, and they are the ones who pull out of it. Those people are the ones I reserve my highest admiration for.
From the very beginning, in 1994, when I came across this fact that the web was growing at 2,300% a year, I was working on Wall Street, a very specialized kind of investment bank called a quantitative hedge fund, a company called D.E. Shaw. And when I decided I was going to go do this crazy thing, I went and told my boss, and he said, well, let's go for a walk. So we went on a 2-hour walk in Central Park, and he actually thought it was a good idea. He's a very smart guy. His name is David Shaw. He's one of the few people I know who has a fully developed left brain, a fully developed right brain, just a super smart guy. And he said, this is a great idea, but it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. That was actually a compelling argument to me. And so I went away. He convinced me to think about it for 2 more days. And it was very hard to make that decision. And until I found the right framework in which to make the decision. And I think because I know there are a lot of people who are interested in entrepreneurial activities out there, I think this could be useful. It's the right framework for me anyway to make the kind of decision was a regret minimization framework. So I projected myself into the future, and I'm 80 years old, and I'm looking back on my life. What do I want to have done at that point? I want to have minimized all the regrets that I have. And I knew that when I was 80, there was no chance that I would regret having walked away from my 1994 Wall Street bonus or any of that kind of thing. I wouldn't even remember that. But I did think there was a chance that I might regret not having participated somehow in this thing that I thought was going to be very exciting called the internet. And I also knew that if I tried and failed, I wouldn't regret that. So once I thought about it that way, it became incredibly easy to make that decision.
What motivates me when times are rough? I find if I'm stressed about something, it's usually because I'm not doing anything about it. And so if I'm stressed about something, I'm trying to figure out, why am I stressed? I'm listening to my body as a signal that something is awry. And then I find that the stress goes away the second I take the first step of identify the source of the stress. Why am I stressed about this? What's going on? And then, talk to somebody about it. Find allies. I would say that if you can find friends who are interested in similar things or want to help you solve a problem, problem solving is inspiring for me all by itself. As long as I have allies, there's nothing more fun than getting in a room with a group of inventors and saying, look, here's the problem. Let's invent a solution to it. And as soon as you start doing that, I find that it turns from something that might create stress into something that creates fun.
Why not stick to the knitting? So, and my point of view on sticking to the knitting is that it's not the right thing for most businesses to be that focused. It's true that you hone skills in a business. You learn to be really good at a few things, and you do want to extend out from those skills. But your customer needs change slowly over time, and you have to learn new skills on behalf of your customers. So basically, we had a bunch of readers as customers, people who love to read. And they didn't know it, our customers, they weren't asking directly, but basically they were saying to us, you're going to have to learn a new skill. You're going to have to stretch and learn how to manufacture hardware
so that you can continue to serve me 10 years from now. That's what our customers were telling us. And that's good. If businesses, try new things and stretch their muscles and put themselves in uncomfortable situations. I think one of the reasons that businesses stick to the knitting is because it's way more comfortable. At Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. And you want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, the first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure out, that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say, I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will greenlight it. And I'm fine with that, because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work, right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. And then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and using the judgment of the most senior people to me, this really helps.
Well, 2 pizza teams is something that we've been preaching at Amazon almost from the very beginning, and it's a simple idea, which is no team should be so large that it cannot be fed with just 2 pizzas. And so obviously to do great things you need big teams, but you need to subdivide them. And the reason that it's so helpful is because there's a we humans grew up around campfires and telling each other stories, and you're sitting at tables tonight that have about 10 people at each table. 10 people, maybe 12 people, is the perfect size to have a natural human coordination without a lot of structure. And if you want to have a big group of 100 people or 500 people organized, you have to have a lot of structure to make that work. And so if you can arrange to do big things with a multitude of small teams, and that takes a lot of effort to organize that way, but if you can figure that out, the communication on those small teams will be very natural and easy.
Look, Warren Buffett has this great quote. He says, you can hold a rock concert, and that's okay. And you can hold a ballet, and that's okay. Just don't hold a rock concert and advertise it as a ballet. Investors come in all shapes and sizes. They have different investment horizons, different approaches, different beliefs about what the right kind of portfolio looks like. And so it's not one, people use Wall Street as a shorthand, but there isn't one type of investor. They come in all shapes and sizes. And you have to be super clear about what kind of company you're trying to build, what your approach is. We laid that out in our 1997 annual shareholder letter. We said we were going to take big bets. We said they were going to fail. We said some of them hopefully were going to work. We said we were going to invest for the long term, that we were going to try to take advantage of market opportunities as they arose. And there's a certain kind of investor who is aligned with that approach. And so, again, you can hold the ballet or the rock concert, and both can work. Just be clear about which one you are, and then people can self-select.
Do you shop on Amazon?
Yeah.
And if you have something, the service you don't like,
Yeah.
so do you just pick up the phone, call your team of 700,000 people, and tell them, I don't like this, change this? Or
You
is
know
there a
what I
system?
do? So I don't do this, it doesn't happen that often, but if I get a delivery that I don't like, maybe I don't like the way it's packaged or something, we have regular meetings of the senior executive team, and I bring the box to the meeting. And when I walk in, I haven't done this in a while, it's been a while, but when I bring in a box, everybody in the room is like, oh no, he's bringing in a box, because it's always some problem. But really the way I get feedback is primarily from my email address is very well known, and I keep it well known. And I get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day from customers, and they always have something interesting to say when something goes wrong. Because we have hundreds of millions of customers around the world, and no matter how good we are, we can still be better. You can always be better. Customers have a divine discontent, and they teach you if you listen to customers. So we watch for that, and we see patterns, and we can find places where it's not working, something's going wrong, and that's really how I get the feedback, is from customer input. And often, you know, in all caps, angry, you ruined my child's birthday because the gift didn't show up on time. And we take that, and what you really want to do is you take that, it's an anecdote, it's a single example, but you need to find the root cause. What went wrong deep inside the system? How did this happen? Because then you can fix it for everyone, so that particular problem will never happen again. You don't just fix the symptom, you have to fix the root cause. And that's been the secret to our operational success for 20 years. I tell senior executives, you should have the least stress. You know, there's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is an interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two. Because you can build a business strategy around the things that are stable in time. And so as you pointed out, in our retail business, we know that customers want low prices. And I know that's going to be true 10 years from now. They want fast delivery. They want vast selection. It's impossible to imagine a future 10 years from now where a customer comes up to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon, I just wish the prices were a little higher. You know how I love Amazon, I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Impossible. And so the effort that we put into those things, spinning those things up, we know the energy we put into it today will still be paying dividends for our customers 10 years from now. And so those, when you have something that you know is true, even over the long term, you can afford to put a lot of energy into it. On AWS, the big ideas are also pretty straightforward. It's impossible for me to imagine that 10 years from now, somebody is going to say, I love AWS, I just wish it were a little less reliable. Or I love AWS, I just wish you would raise prices. It should be a little more expensive. Or I love AWS, and I wish you would innovate and improve the APIs at a slightly slower rate. None of those things you can imagine. And so the big ideas in business are often very obvious, but it's very hard to maintain a firm grasp of the obvious at all times. But if you can do that and continue to spin up those flywheels and put energy into those things, as we're doing with AWS, over time, you build a better and better service for your customers on the things that genuinely matter to them. What I want to achieve with Blue Origin is to build the heavy lifting infrastructure that allows for the kind of dynamic entrepreneurial explosion of thousands of companies in space that I have witnessed over the last 21 years on the internet. So when I think about the founding of Amazon.com, it only could work, so it take you back to 1995, July 1995, we opened our doors. And this is a 10-person company. I'm driving the packages to the post office myself. And we were sitting on a bunch of heavy lifting infrastructure. Otherwise, a tiny company could never have started Amazon.com. You couldn't do it. For example, there was already a gigantic logistics network called the U.S. Postal Service and UPS and FedEx. That would have been tens of billions, actually hundreds of billions of dollars of capital that you would have had to have laid out if you had to build a logistics network. We didn't have to do that. It existed. That heavy lifting was already done. The internet itself was sitting on top of, at that time, the long-distance phone network. Again, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of capital put in place for long-distance phone calls, but repurposed for the internet. Payment system. There was already a payment system. We didn't have to do that. It was called the credit card, and it had been initially put in place for travelers, and so on and so on. And you can go through, and what we were able to do is take all of that heavy lifting infrastructure and kind of reassemble it in a new way and do something new and inventive with it. And that's one lens through which you can view the founding of Amazon.com. In space today, that is impossible. On the internet today, two kids in their dorm room can reinvent an industry. That's because the heavy lifting infrastructure is in place for that. Today, two kids in their dorm room can't do anything interesting in space. You could build a CubeSat. There's not that much interesting about CubeSats. And that may change, but right now, there's just, there are certain laws of physics and certain things you need size for, and things need to be big. We need to be able to put big things in space at low cost. And so if I'm 80 years old and I can say to myself that Blue Origin did the heavy lifting, I'm using my Amazon winnings to do a new piece of heavy lifting infrastructure, which is low cost access to space. Vehicles have to be reusable. You can't throw them away. Throw away space vehicles every time, you're never going to lower the cost. So we're trying to lower the price of admission into space so that thousands of entrepreneurs can then do amazing, surprising things. Nobody in 1995,
so it's not that much. Just
nobody in 95 predicted
travel.
Snapchat. Right. It's like, I can't predict for you what amazing entrepreneurs, brilliant, amazing entrepreneurs will do in space. But I know if I give them low-cost access to space, some brilliant, 22-year-old is going to figure it out.
It's one of those things about what companies get sustainable. It's those that provide platforms upon which others can build.
If you empower others to do things. So AWS is like that. Kindle Direct Publishing is like that. Our third-party selling business is like that. Fulfillment by Amazon is like that. Every time you figure out some way of providing tools and services that empower other people to deploy their creativity, you're really onto something. My opinion is that I can do some things that Amazon would be hard for other people to do only because of my history with the company. And as the company has grown, of course, my job has changed very much. And it has, my main job today is I'm kind of I work hard at helping to maintain the culture. A culture of high standards, of operational excellence, of inventiveness, of willingness to fail, willingness to make bold experiments. I'm the counterbalance to the institutional no who can say yes. But I won't. I'm not going to be here forever. Amazon is a really many of the traits that make Amazon unusual are now deeply ingrained in the culture. In fact, if I wanted to change them, I couldn't. If I decided tomorrow that I wish Amazon did less pioneering and more close following, I couldn't do it. The culture cultures are self-reinforcing, and that's a good thing. The people who come to the company, we get sometimes people come to the company and they find Amazon very boring because we don't have enough, competitive zeal. We don't wake up. Some annual planning processes and some companies literally start with who are our three biggest enemies, and then here's how we're going to hold them at bay or defeat them. And we don't have such a list at Amazon. It's not how our annual planning process works. And so, but if you're on the other hand, if you're the kind of person who gets up in the morning and says in the shower time, you know, what can we invent for customers and what can we do differently and how can we improve that experience and so on, then, you know, then it's going to be a playground. I still run into work, by the way. I took my family on vacation to France, my wife's extended family. There were about 20 of us. And we had an unbelievably good time, great food, everything. We were there for a week. I got back to Seattle and I ran into the office. I'm having so much fun. As the owner of the Post, I know that at times the Post is going to write stories that are going to make very powerful people very unhappy. And
are you upset if they are writing critical stories about Amazon, which they do?
No, I'm not upset at all. When I first bought the Post in 2013, never. And I never. I would be humiliated to interfere. I would be so embarrassed. I would turn bright red, and it has nothing to do with. I don't even get so far. I just don't want to. For me, it would feel icky. It would feel gross. It would be one of those things when I'm 80 years old. I would be so unhappy with myself if I interfered. Why would I? Yeah. I want that paper to be independent. One of the unusual things that we do in the Kindle device business is we sell our hardware near break even. And so we make money when people use the device, not when they buy the device. And that is very aligning with customers. If I buy a device and I put it in my desk drawer and never use it, then Amazon doesn't deserve to make any money. Likewise, it causes us to have the right kinds of behaviors. So for example, if we're not making money when people buy the device, then we don't need people to be on the upgrade treadmill. We have people who are still using 5-year-old Kindle Ones, and we're perfectly happy about that. AWS is very similar because it's a pay-as-you-go service. We are not incented to get people to overbuy hardware, to operate at low utilization rates. Our point of view on this is if we can arrange things in such a way that our interests are aligned with our customers, then in the long term, that will work out really well for customers and it'll work out really well for Amazon. My view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading. I like the phrase work-life harmony because I know that if I am energized at work, happy at work, feeling like I'm adding value, part of a team, whatever energizes you, that makes me better at home. It makes me a better husband, a better father, and likewise, if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss, all the things. It's not primarily about, there may be crunch periods where it's about the number of hours in the week, but that's not the real thing. Usually it's about, do you have energy? And is your work depriving you of energy, or is your work generating energy for you? And you know, there are people, everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people they drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're gonna be. Are you gonna add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle, it's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, that maybe there are limits, and they probably. But I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy, and that's what I would recommend. And that's what I do recommend to interns and execs.
So as number one on the list, we were talking to Steve Case yesterday, and he had been number one. And a couple of years later, he was not on the list.
Walter, you're making me really nervous.
No, don't be nervous. Just tell me what could happen that would do that to you and Amazon, and how do you prevent that? Do you worry? it could all come unraveled?
Well, I kind of have this experience kind of already happened to me because you put me on the cover of Time Magazine as Person of the Year in 1999, and about a year later, the internet bubble burst. I think Amazon stock went from $113 a share to $6 or something like that. So these things happen. The thing for companies is you need to be nimble and robust. So you need to be able to take a punch, and you also need to be quick and innovative and doing new things at a high speed. That's the best defense against the future. And you have to always be leaning into the future. If you're leaning away from the future is going to win every time. Never, ever, ever lean away from the future. To be innovative, you have to experiment. If you want to have more invention, you need to do more experiments per week, per month, per year, per decade. It's that simple. You cannot invent without experimenting. And here's the other thing about experiments. Lots of them fail. If you know it's going to work in advance, it is not an experiment. And what happens in big organizations, Amazon's a big organization now too, the Air Force is a big organization, is that we start to confuse experimentation with operational excellence. So operational excellence is one of our 4 key principles at Amazon. We're building a fulfillment center. We've built over 150 large fulfillment centers around the world now. We know how to do that. That is not an experiment. If we build the 151st fulfillment center and screw it up, that's just a failure. That's not the kind of failure we're seeking. We want failures where we're trying to do something new, untested, never proven. That's a real experiment, and they come in all scale sizes. You need people who, and this is very tricky, you need people who are experts in a certain domain area, because the world is so complex today, it's really hard to invent something if you're not an expert, if you don't have the underlying tools at your disposal and know what's going on. You can't invent something in neurosurgery without knowing something about neurosurgery. It's just going to be very difficult because we're very advanced. And that's true in every field of endeavor. But to really be an inventor, you have to combine that expertise with the beginner's mind. You have to have a certain childlike ability to not be trapped by your expertise. And that fresh look, that beginner's mind, once you're an expert, is unbelievably hard to maintain. But great inventors are always looking. They have a certain divine discontent, and they may have seen something 1,000 times, and still it occurs to them that thing, even though they're accustomed to it, could be improved. And that's, you have to look for people like that. And I also think cultures support that. You can't, even if you're that kind of person, if you're in a culture that doesn't support failure, willingness to fail is critical for invention, willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. Most inventions don't really work that well in the beginning. They're clumsy, they're little toddlers, they're always falling and tripping. And so you have to have a culture in your organization that supports this kind of stumbling and wandering. Just because you're wandering doesn't mean you're lost. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're trying to invent. There are a lot of things that are a waste of time. When you think about your life, I often tell people that I work with, if you can get, because people have very high standards for how they want their work life to be. And I said, look, if you can get your work life to be where you enjoy half of it, that is amazing, because very few people ever achieve that. Because the truth is, everything comes with overhead. That's reality. Everything comes with pieces that you don't like. You could be a Supreme Court justice, and there's still going to be pieces of your job you don't like. You can be a university professor, and it's still going to be, you have to go to committee meetings, and you have to do things. Every job comes with pieces you don't like. And we need to say, that's part of it. and not resent those pieces, or try not to, but also try to minimize them. I tell senior executives, you should have the least stress. You know, there's this weird, I think, false idea that CEOs, I'm a CEO, there's this false idea that CEOs are under the most stress. Well, I look at that, I'm like, why? You're in charge. Why don't you delegate the stress? It's your choice. And so you have to figure out how to set up your life in such a way that you can minimize the things. And I find people don't dislike hard work. What people dislike is being out of control. Like, they can't control their life. They can't control their environment. This happens to me when I get overscheduled. I hate being overscheduled. I want some time to be able to think and free myself. We all have the same amount of time in the world. Nobody has more time than anybody else. And when you become a very successful person, one of the things, you start to get overscheduled. You have this event, you had to agree to do this, and maybe last night you were like, why did I agree to do this? I have to go on stage tomorrow. I wish I were really with my family. And, you know, or I hope maybe not this case. Let's say that you like this one. But in general, that kind of thing happens. And so you have to guard your time and try to stay a little bit flexible. So that's, for me, it's not a waste of time, but I like to have some freedom of movement rather than having every minute of every day scheduled.
When you buy over the internet, Amazon, do you ever get the wrong order? Is anything ever wrong? What do? Do you call up and complain, or you don't have any problems?
No,
with that?
I'm a customer of Amazon, hopefully like all of you in this room.
Is there one person full-time who services your account?
If there's anyone in this room who's not an Amazon customer, see me right afterwards and I'll walk you through it. It's, I have problems sometimes, and I treat them like the same way I treat a problem that I would get from a customer. My email address is famous, and I keep it, and I read it. It's jeff@amazon.com. I don't see every email that I get anymore because I get too many, but I see a lot of them. And I use my curiosity to pick out certain emails. So I'll get one from a customer, and there's a defect. You know, we've done something wrong. Usually people are writing us, not always, but usually they're writing us because we've screwed up their order somehow. And so I'm looking at this, and for some reason, something seems a little odd about that one. And so I'll ask the team to do a case study and find real root cause, or causes, it's usually causes, real root causes, and then real root fixes. So that when you fix it, you're not fixing it for that one customer, you're fixing it for every customer. And that process is a gigantic part of what we do. So I would treat if I have a failed order or some bad customer experience, I would treat it just like that. When I started Amazon, it was 25 years ago. I started Amazon in 1994. When I went to seek investors, the first question I had to answer is, what is the internet? None of my investors had ever heard of the internet. And the idea that I had in mind was to build a bookstore. I realized that we could build a store which would have every book ever printed in any language, in print or out of print. And we could do that online. It would be impossible in a physical store. And that was the founding idea of Amazon. But did I expect what would happen today? No. You know, we started, I've been at Amazon when it was one person, me, when it was 10 people, when it was 100 people, when it was 1,000 people. And today, when it's more than 700,000 people and approaching 70,000 people just here in India. So no, I did not predict that. And actually, I think if anybody had predicted that, they would have needed to be immediately institutionalized in a mental facility because it's not a normal thing to have happen. My dream when I started Amazon was that one day we might be able to afford a forklift. So it's been a very fun journey for me. And by the way, I still tap dance into work. I'm having so much fun.
Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and this is the one that often catches people a little by surprise, because one of our leadership principles is that good leaders are right a lot. And it sounds kind of like, well, great, but Is there some way that I can practice being right a lot? And you're not going to be right all the time, but I do think with practice, you can be right more often. And I've observed people who are right a lot, and I notice a few things about them. The first is that people who are right a lot, they listen a lot. And people who are right a lot change their mind a lot. And people who are right a lot, they seek to disconfirm their most profoundly held convictions, which is very unnatural for humans. So humans mostly, as we go about life, we're very selective in the evidence that we let seep into us. And we like to observe the evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And people who are right a lot work very hard to do that unnatural thing of trying to disconfirm their beliefs.
I was living and working in New York City in 1994. I came across the fact that the World Wide Web was growing very quickly. It was tiny, but it was growing very fast. Most people had not heard of it. And I came up with this idea. The idea initially was very simple. It was to sell books online. And I went to my boss, who I liked a lot. His name was David. And I said, I have this idea to start this company to sell books on the internet. And he took me on a long walk in Central Park in New York and listened to this idea in great detail. And he said, it actually sounds like a really good idea to me, but I think it would be a better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And I thought about that. That made a certain amount of sense to me. And he said, why don't you think about it for 2 days before you make a final decision? And so I went away and I thought about this. And I was trying to figure out how to make this decision, because in the moment, personal life decisions, those choices can be very challenging. And I finally figured out for me the right way to think about it, which was I wanted not to have regrets. I pictured myself 80 years old, and thinking back on my life in a quiet moment of reflection, would I regret leaving this company in the middle of the year and walking away from my annual bonus and all those things that in the moment could be very confusing? And I thought, when I'm 80, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not even going to remember it. But what I will do, I know for a fact, I have this idea, and if I don't try, I'm going to regret having never tried. And I know also, if I try and fail, I'll never regret having tried and failed. And as soon as I thought about it that way, I knew I had to give it a try.
There's your completely massive and globally dominant commerce business, first party and third party. There is AWS, Amazon Web Services, which came out of nowhere and is now massive. You're in the hardware business, including Echo and Kindle and the phone, grocery delivery, payments, TV shows. You're now making TV shows, advertising. Jeff, how can you possibly do all of that?
You're exhausting me.
How can you possibly do all of that and do it okay? Even okay, let alone good.
So I think one way to think about this is, what are you really focusing on? So, I'm focusing on those things that I think make Amazon unusual. Genuine customer obsession. So like every single thing you just mentioned, when our senior executives sit down and review those programs, they're looking for customer obsession. There are a couple of other things that are essential for innovation and invention that are not as fun. One of them is you have to have a willingness to fail. You have to have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. If you do something in a new way, and I don't care what it is, people are initially going to misunderstand it relative to the traditional way. And there'll be well-meaning critics who, genuinely want the best outcome, but they're worried about this new way. And there'll also be, of course, self-interested critics who have a vested interest in the traditional, they have some profit stream tied to the traditional way. But doing things, if you never want to be criticized, for goodness sake, don't do anything new. So it's okay though, if you have a willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time, if you have a willingness to fail, then what you can do is you can ramp up your rate of experimentation. So successful invention is inventions that customers care about. It's actually relatively easy to invent new things that customers don't care about. But successful invention, if you want to do a lot of that, you basically have to increase your rate of experimentation. And that you can think of as a process. How do you go about organizing your systems, your people, all of your assets, your own daily life and how you spend time? How do you organize those things to increase your rate of experimentation? Because not all of your experiments are going to work.
Now that you have about 600,000 employees, I calculated you're adding about 250 people a day. You've mentioned that you're trying to fend off day 2.
Yeah.
And you said that day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciatingly painful decline, followed by death. That is why it is always day 1.
Yeah.
How's that work?
Well, so day 1, this is a phrase that we use at Amazon all the time. I've been using it in my first annual shareholder letter from 20 years ago. And we say it's always day 1. And it needs to be day 1 for the reason that you just mentioned. And so the real question for me is, how do you go about maintaining a day 1 culture? You know, it's great to have the scale of Amazon. We have financial resources, we have lots of brilliant people, we can accomplish great things, we have global scope, we have operations all over the world. But the downside of that is that you can lose your nimbleness, you can lose your entrepreneurial spirit, you can lose that kind of heart that small companies often have. And so if you could have the best of both worlds, if you can have that entrepreneurial spirit and heart, while at the same time having all the advantages that come with scale and scope, think of the things that you could do. And so the question is, how do you achieve that? The scale is good because it makes you robust. You know, a big boxer can take a punch to the head. The question is, you also want to dodge those punches. So you'd like to be nimble. You want to be big and nimble. And I find that there are a lot of things that are protective of the day 1 mentality. I already spent some time on one of them, which is customer obsession. I think that's the most important thing. If you can, and it gets harder as you get bigger. When you're a little tiny company, say you're a 10-person startup company, every single person in the company is focused on the customer. When you get to be a bigger company, you've got middle managers and you've got all these layers, and those people aren't on the front lines. They're not interacting with customers every day. They're insulated from customers, and they start to manage not the customer happiness directly, but they start to manage through proxies like metrics and processes, and some of those things can become bureaucratic. So it's very challenging. But one of the things that happens is the decision-making velocity slows down. And I think one of the reasons that happens is that people, junior executives inside the big company, start to model all decisions as if they are heavyweight, irreversible, highly consequential decisions. And so even two-way doors, you make a decision, it's the wrong decision, you can just back through the door and try again. Even those reversible decisions start to be made with heavyweight processes. And so you can teach people that these pitfalls and traps, and then teach them to avoid those traps. And that's what we're trying to do at Amazon, so that we can maintain our inventiveness and our heart and our kind of small company spirit, even as we have the scale and scope of a larger company.
If you want another amazing Jeff Bezos video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
If you focus on the controllable inputs to your business instead of the outputs, in the long term, you get better results.
Dream big, act small.
Failure is essentially irrelevant.